explain what a concussion actually is. I figured that this would be good for all of you to understand. First off, here is a brain cell. It's not a very good drawing of one, but it's a brain cell nonetheless. You have a cell body, and then you have these long tails called axons. Inside of a brain cell, you have a bunch of molecules. On the outside of a brain cell, you have a bunch of different molecules. When a signal comes in from one brain cell to another, there's little channels that will open on that brain cell. When those channels open, the stuff that's inside escapes outwards, and the stuff that's outside comes rushing in. So there's this exchange that happens, and it makes this brain cell excited. When that brain cell gets excited, it passes that signal on to the brain cells that are connected to it. So you have brain cells here, and here, and here, and they'll pass that signal on because their stuff will exchange, they'll get excited, and they'll continue that process. So this is how communication happens within the cells of your brain. Now, when a concussion happens, we used to think it was the brain hitting the inside of the skull, creating kind of a bruising on the outer part of the brain. That's not exactly what happens. What we now know of concussion, or at least what the current hypothesis of concussion is that the brain actually gets stretched. So if we think of the brain as jello, and if I was to shake a plate of jello, it's going to deform up this way and it's going to deform up that way. And if I was to zoom in on every little jello fiber strand, we would see each of those strands getting stretched. And it would kind of deform up this way, and then it would deform up that way, and you can picture this jello jiggling back and forth and getting stretched. The brain is actually the same consistency as that. So when the brain gets hit and it starts to jiggle back and forth like that, you get this stretching of the brain tissue. When that stretch occurs, these little channels get pulled open, the stuff that's inside escapes and the stuff that's outside. So what's going to happen? Well, the brain's going to think that it's received a signal, and it's going to fire, and it's going to pass that signal all to the next brain cells. So all a concussion is not a bruising of the brain as it smashes into the inside of the skull, but actually it's millions of brain cells all at the same time that get tricked into thinking that they've just received a signal. And so you get this electrical storm that starts to happen, and then it kind of calms down. So the first part of concussion is called the excitatory phase. This is when all those brain cells are firing and getting excited because they think that they've received a signal. Then, this is what happens. The energy molecule in our brains is called ATP. This down here represents time. All of that brain cell firing that happens in that initial little part of the concussion is a very short duration, but what it does is it burns a lot of energy. So over the next few hours to days, your energy stores start to plummet. Okay, you hit your peak low, and then you start to rebuild those energy stores back up until you're back up to here, and then you're kind of fully recovered from that concussion injury. Okay, with a concussion, you only get about a 20% reduction in your ATP. When you look at more severe forms of brain injury, like moderate and severe traumatic brain injury, you can get as much as 50% reduction in your ATP, to the point where you actually get permanent damage of brain tissue. With concussion, there's no observable damage to brain tissue, which is why MRIs and CT scans are normal. But you get about a 20% reduction in this energy, this ATP level. You hit your peak low around day 5 to day 7, and then you kind of slowly start back up. Now, the studies that have been done on this have found that the full kind of metabolic recovery happens at some point between 22 and 45 days, depending on the study that you see. So concussion has two phases. The first phase is excitatory. This phase is called spreading depression, where you drop in energy, and anyone who's been around anybody with concussion is going to notice that they feel very fatigued, they're going to want to go to sleep, and their symptoms will get worse and worse and worse and worse over those few days, and then eventually they'll start feeling better. Most people's symptoms go away around day 7 to day 10. That's the majority of people. But in about 30% of people, they're going to have symptoms even beyond this time point, and that's what's called post-concussion syndrome, PCS, or what's now known as just persistent concussion symptoms. Getting back into this pathophysiological process here, this